interpretation by clicking the globe icon in the bottom of your window and selecting your language. As we come together today from many different regions of our vast nation, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land we call Canada as the traditional and ancestral territory of many Indigenous peoples. We respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. When the board met in November, CPATA's CFO, Sean Walker, and CEO, Judah Straczynski, provided a high-level overview of CPATA's budget assumptions and approach for 2024. The main focus of today's meeting will be the formal review and approval of that budget. I'm pleased to advise that the CPATA Audit and Risk Committee Chair, Bob Plamondon, will be joining us today, and I thank Bob in advance for the work that he and the committee have done to review the draft budget. Before we launch into today's meeting, I want to mention that CPATA participated in the Intellectual Property Ontario Summit on December 4th. Karima Bawa, a CPATA director, is the chair of IP Ontario. The summit that Karima and her colleagues created was a wonderful opportunity for the sharing of knowledge and exchange of ideas. Leonora Hoyka, who's also a CPATA director, was a speaker at the conference. We are so fortunate to have the expertise of such distinguished and respected members of the IP community on our board. And Leonora, you're here today. Thank you so much. I'd like to extend a warm thank you as well to all the licensees who have and will participate in the exam redevelopment process. CPATA has been focused on setting clear standards and competency profiles for the professions and on making improvements to the qualifying exams to test against these standards and competencies. In 2024, CPATA will offer the new qualifying exams for the first time, and we could not have done it without the support of licensees. We filled over 30 positions on our exam advisory groups, and we're still seeking a few licensees to fill additional roles. If you are a licensee who's interested in contributing to your profession in this way, please stay tuned for more information in CPATA's December newsletter. A reminder to Class 2 agents that December 31st is the due date to put professional liability insurance coverage in place for your practice. Professional liability insurance protects the public as well as insured professionals. Insurance became required for Class 2 agents with CPATA's bylaw revisions earlier this year. And now let's turn to today's agenda. The first item on our agenda is to invite board members to declare if they have any conflicts regarding any matters on the agenda. And so you've all had a chance to review the agenda and the materials. I'll just go around the room and ask if anyone has any conflict to declare. All right, so from those of you I can see on my screen, I'm not seeing any, so we will move ahead into the next session. The approval, the first section here is consent agenda. So just one housekeeping question, Judah. I'm noting that there is no motion to approve the agenda on this on my meeting agenda. Is that not required, or should we make a motion to approve the agenda as stated?
It's as you wish. We
okay.
can adopt the agenda if you wish.
Yeah, I'm just going to go around and just make sure that everyone is satisfied with the agenda, that no one has any additions, anything they'd like to add or remove from this agenda. Okay, not seeing any. I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Could I have someone move to do so? Iris, thank you. A seconder? Leonora, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Okay, this agenda is adopted. Thanks so much. Next item is the consent agenda. We have just one item on our consent agenda, which is a motion to approve the minutes of the November 9th meeting. So I'm going to read the motion and ask for someone to move the motion and second it. That gets it on the table, and then we can open it for discussion. So the motion, be it resolved that the minutes of the November 9th, 2023 board meeting are approved. Could I have someone make that motion? Leonora, thank you. A seconder. Amber, thanks so much. So the motion is on the table. Any discussion, questions, comments around the minutes of November 9th? All right, seeing none. Since I can't see anyone, rather than asking, who's in favor of the motion, I'm just going to ask, is anyone opposed? Because then your hand will raise and I'll be able to see you on the screen. Okay, so that motion is also carried. Thanks so much. So the next section is our committee reports. CPATA's committees play a vital role in the college's regulatory initiatives and in assisting the board in its fiduciary oversight. First up is the report of the Investigations Committee, presented by Victoria Reese, CPATA's General Counsel, Professional Regulation. Over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Ruth. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. To make it easier this time, there is one report, but it has many tentacles. And so to do this efficiently, we're going to focus on the work of the Investigations Committee, but it'll touch on the work of the Discipline Committee and the Professional Responsibility Program. You also have in your materials for your information 2 policies that were recently approved by the Investigations Committee, and I am going to touch on those because they're important. In terms of the committees, I last reported in September on all 3 areas of regulatory operations and PR. Since then, the Investigations Committee met twice, and the activity is summarized in the memo in the materials for you. In particular, the Investigations Committee approved 2 new notices of application, and these haven't yet been publicly posted on the website because it's essential that we effectively serve the licensees first before we then make it public. So at the present time, we've got 2 new and 1 held over matter proceeding into 2024, and it isn't even 2024 yet. The 2 new matters involve a suspended patent agent and a suspended trademark agent in training. The Investigations Committee has also appointed an investigator to investigate a client complaint against a patent agent, and this investigation has commenced and will continue on into probably early 2024. The Discipline Committee didn't meet as a whole. They've reduced their regular committee meetings to 2 or 3 a year because now they've begun doing the actual proceedings. So proceedings did get underway for the 2 matters, the subject of notices of application that are on the website. And specifically, a contested hearing with regard to Alpesh Patel was scheduled to be heard over 3 days at the end of November. And there was interest in this proceeding by other regulators and members of the public who were made aware of the subject licensee and the nature of the hearing through the public notice of application. And we received inquiries from some of these interested parties after the proceeding. As often happens, as some of you will know, with professional regulation proceedings, at the 11th hour, negotiations ensued, which resulted in a presentation of a joint submission with agreed facts and a submission on penalty. The panel reserved its decision, but if approved, CPATA's hearing costs will be lower for this matter. And the suspended licensee would make a contribution toward a portion of the CPATA's costs as well prior to reinstatement following suspension. So this is a positive outcome if approved. And it's really thanks to a very dedicated and tenacious staff team at CPATA that our first digital hearing went off without a hitch. And the hearing was conducted via Zoom and with a concurrent live streaming on YouTube. So it was very open and accessible, and that was clear from the contacts we got afterwards. Pre-hearing conferences are underway in the Matthew O'Day matter, and it's not anticipated that the hearing itself will take place probably till the late spring of 2024. With regard to the 2 policies I mentioned, the Investigations Committee dedicated most of 2023 to developing the policy on interim proceedings. And this was approved in November. It's an important policy because it fills in the procedural details and public interest factors for consideration when the committee must consider whether to exercise their authority under the Act and order an interim suspension, practice restrictions, or conditions pending the completion of an investigation of a complaint. So this authority represents a very significant public protection tool when the investigations committee has evidence of imminent or ongoing serious harm to the public that can't be rectified or addressed through any other means. It's an authority that's likely rarely to be used. The IC also approved the policy on appeal of registrar's decisions, and this policy sets out the process to be followed and the scope of the appeal when complaints believe that a registrar's decision to dismiss their complaint was inconsistent with the college's Act, bylaws, or regulatory objectives. And the registrar's authority to dismiss complaints was created with the last round of amendments to the Act and the bylaws. And again, that authority has not yet been used. Excuse me. In terms of other professional responsibility business, I'm happy to say that we received a number of ethics inquiries and agent conduct inquiries in the last few weeks. We are meeting our target of acknowledging these within about 24 to 48 hours and responding as quickly as possible, usually in about 2 to 4 days. One potential patent client asked us what protections were in place to prevent an agent from stealing their invention. And that required a pretty long answer. I'm not sure he believed us. I'm really pleased to say that we've had a successful resolution of 2 unauthorized practice matters under investigation. One involved a business in Alberta that was offering legal and trademark services without having either an agent or a lawyer obviously employed. So the complainant suggested that the employees were no more qualified to offer these services than a car wash business. I reached out to the Law Society of Alberta, who helpfully conducted their own inquiries on our behalf, and then advised me that as a result of their intervention, that business now has an agent and lawyer employed on the front line. That's a great outcome. The second matter involved a US patent and trademark agent working with an IP firm in British Columbia, which firm advertised on their website that the agent was both a US and Canadian patent and trademark agent, which he was not. I reached out to the agent in question, as well as the managing partner, felt he should be part of the conversation. Of the Canadian firm, I pointed out the misleading advertising and the potential consequences of same, and was very pleased to see that both responded very quickly and took steps to remove the misleading aspects of the website and elsewhere within about 2 hours of my contact. So I only wish all licensees and those who are potentially engaged in UAP would respond so quickly and professionally. So that's the report on behalf of the 2 committees and myself, and I'm happy to take any questions. Leonora.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria, for, as always, an excellent and concise report. I have just one very short question, and it may even be directed to Judah, to the CEO, rather than to you. And that's about regarding the investigation committee report, the policy on appeal of registrar's decisions. I just wanted to verify, and maybe this is with the CEO. Is it the registrar's practice, or is it in a policy to include, when rejecting a complaint, to include information on appealing to the investigations committee?
I can answer that. It's part of the template of, although we haven't done this yet, but in every case where there is a right of appeal, that is the last thing that goes in the letter. Here is your right, here's the authority, and here is how you do it.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much.
Tom? Oh, sorry, Ruth.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. I can't see everyone, so you go ahead.
Okay.
You mentioned that the hearing, one of the hearings, I gather it was the determination was on the basis of an agreed statement or something along those lines, but that it had been live streamed for part of it, or that you actually had it live streamed on YouTube?
Yes, so the first half of the first day, which was the 26th of November, I think, was the presentation by both counsel of the actual proposed settlement, the facts, the penalty, the precedents supporting this, Both the member and council were present. And so the whole thing took place in public. And then the committee decided to reserve and come back with their decision.
Well, but so is the college blazing a trail in this? I mean, it's one thing to have a public hearing on, Zoom or something like that, but it's quite another thing to actually have it on YouTube. Was that controversial at all? And that's the first question. And is that going to be standard for our hearings, that we will have them available to the public to view via YouTube?
Well, I'll answer that. Our governing legislation requires that our hearings be open to the public.
Mhm.
And as we were built through the pandemic, courts themselves had moved to stream hearings of importance to the public. And what we saw was actually an increase in access to justice, in the access to viewing justice in action. We had some high profile cases with hundreds of people viewing it. I'm not suggesting for a second that these sorts of cases are likely to garner that level of attention. But in order to operate remotely and maintain open courts, the only way to really do that is to enable viewing. The easiest logistical way for us to do that is to enable live streaming via YouTube, which allows people to watch, but to do so in a way where they are completely separate from the hearing process itself. So there would be no Zoom bombing, and we can control the YouTube settings so that people can watch, but they're not able to otherwise engage. And so it's actually been a fantastic access to justice story. And I think this does merit even a further zoom out, because as a national regulator, the comparators for federal tribunals, if you are going to move to, if you had done this before the pandemic, the costs would have been significantly higher. The accessibility would have been significantly lower. By this, I mean, take this case, for example. The person who is the subject of the complaint would have needed to travel to the hearing, to be there in person with their counsel, adding cost and time and effort. We would have needed to rent space to create a tribunal hearing room, whether that was a hotel area or office space or boardroom. We would have needed court reporters potentially to help with the back end logistics. We would have needed to have our own counsel travel to that hearing. We would have needed to send our own counsel to the hearing, and possibly staff. All of this would have increased the costs significantly, and that is the way it used to run. But by starting as a virtual tribunal, we've taken the best practices from what we have seen since 2020 and applied them here in the best, most cost-effective way that maintains the open courts principle in a way that's fair to all parties.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for that explanation, Judah. Victoria, do you have comments on what Judah just shared with us here? How do you feel about that?
That was extremely helpful. And Tom, you asked if there was any controversy. There was not. One thing that we didn't want to do, which is what some other regulators have done, which involves people applying to participate and to registering in advance and that sort of thing, and telling us who they are and so on. And we've decided that we wanted this to be as accessible as possible. And so by having it streamed, you don't have to go through a registration process and all of that. And yes, this will be the go forward method, whether it's contested or by settlement. No proceeding that is to be public will be anything other than public. So, Dana.
I just wanted to add that the YouTube is used to stream the recording, but the video does not live on. So in that way, it is like attending a live hearing. It's deleted, it's taken down, and it's no longer accessible.
Perfect, Dana. Thank you so much for that clarification. That was you read my mind. That was going to be my next question. So that's fantastic. Bob, welcome. I see you have joined us. So It's awesome to see you, and thank you. In my introductory remarks, I was thanking you so much for the heavy lifting that you and your committee have done to review the budget and bring forward your recommendations to us. So we're really looking forward to that part of the meeting, and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ruth. Sorry I missed it. I just, the link wasn't in my invite, so I had to do some scrambling and.
Yeah, Bob, I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little, yeah, we'll have to have a little debrief on that because that happened to a few members. So thank
Okay.
you so much. All right.
So,
Yeah, so thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
so I just didn't know whether you wanted me to give any remarks from the committee before we get to the budget, or?
We will when we get to that part of the agenda. It
Okay.
would be awesome to hear from you right now. In this moment, I'm assuming that you probably have a copy of our agenda. In this moment, we are in the report section. We've just had the Investigations Committee report from Victoria, which you saw.
Right, yeah.
And next up is the Registration Committee report by Jen. So
Okay.
thank you. We'll queue you up when
Okay, great.
when it's your chance to talk. So thanks so much. Victoria, that was a brilliant presentation. Thanks so much. Judah, Dana, thank you so much for adding your color commentary to the questions around it. That's terrific. If there are no more questions for Victoria, not seeing any, we'll move to the next report, which is the Registration Committee report by Jen Slobodkin, our Deputy Registrar. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you very much, Ruth. My report today is not going to be as long as it was during the last meeting. I think I gave you quite an overview during the last meeting, but I'll give you a little brief update. So the committee met last week, actually, and they received the audit report or evaluation report, self-assessment report, if you will, on fair registration practices that we have completed against the processes and policies that we put in place on the registration side. And just as a quick reminder for the board, fair registration practices take into account 4 main pillars. Transparency looks at clear rules, straightforward processes, and direct access to information. Objectivity focuses on consistency in decision-making, being valid, reliable, and relevant in their decision-making practices. Impartiality looks at decisions that are free of bias and identifying and addressing sources of bias. And then fairness, identifying and communicating registration steps and documentation, removing barriers to entry, being expedient, and having an arm's length review process. So I'm happy to report that overall we have met the general duties of fairness, transparency, objectivity, and impartiality. And we did identify a number of recommendations that we are going to be looking through to improve the processes that we've already put in place. Those things can include updates to the website to make processes and steps more clear. It could include some amendments to policies that we have in place, as well as looking at additional training for committee members and others that are helping us with the competency initiative, like exam board members, et cetera. So one of the biggest things I think that came out of that review, though, was the benchmarking that we have started to do on our processing timelines for Class 3 applications. And that was probably one of the best news stories that came out of the review. I'm happy to say that we take approximately 16 calendar days, so that's about 2 weeks, to approve a completed Class 3 application. And comparing that to other regulators, sometimes they take between 4 and 6 weeks on average. Some larger regulators can take longer than that. I've heard up to 3 months. So I think that that sits us very well within the professional regulatory world in Canada in ensuring that we make timely registration decisions. So that was very positive. And the committee also got an update on the test specifications. As I mentioned during the last meeting, a lot of work has been done for the skills exams for next year. And so as a result of those development guides being created, a couple of amendments to the test specifications were completed and presented to the committee, which were also approved. So that's what's happening on the registration side. We will be giving more information to the board at your March meeting about that fair registration practices self-assessment. And we'll just continue our work on the examination redevelopment. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Jen. What a great report. Any questions? Comments for Jen? We're good. Okay, seeing none. Jen, thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
terrific. All right, so next up is the Audit and Risk Committee report. So we have Bob Plamondon, our chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, here with us today. And we also have our CFO, Sean Walker, and Judah Straczynski, our CEO, who are going to jointly give us some color commentary around the budget. So why don't I hand it over to you, Bob, to kick off this section and share whatever you'd like to share with the board.
Great, thanks, Ruth. And I'll just give you some opening remarks before we get into the budget to say to the board that the committee is working very much as intended with independent members, including me acting as chair, and not being on the board and taking that role, along with Maureen Rogers, who is a very strong member of the board. We have two board members who serve with us, Idis and Jeff. So we have a combination of independence and expertise, and we're all very superbly supported by Sean Walker, our accountant, and Judah. So we engage deeply in all these issues. At each meeting, we monitor the financial condition of CPATA, analyzing variances against prior year and budget, looking for any insight we can gain and opportunities to save money or deploy resources more effectively. We do meet 6-7 times a year, so it's fairly frequently they're getting touch points on our finances. We also review compliance with legislation, and there's a series of acts that we look at. One that's, I think, would be of particular interest to board members is where you have a financial liability. So, for example, on the source deductions associated with the payroll, if they're not made, Canada Revenue Agency will come knocking on your door for the money. So we do have signed verifications from the CEO and our accountant that all of this, the compliance is current. We also develop and review the risk register, which is, I would say, we're fairly mature in our financial system and review and analysis, and the risk register is something that is being strengthened, on an ongoing basis. As you will see today, we do develop the budget and look at different scenarios, reviewing compared to prior year and current priorities. And incorporating into that budget contingencies, some prudence, reserves, and we're looking at the long-term sustainability and resilience of the organization from a financial perspective. And we also supervise the external audit. So that process, we work with the external auditors, and you'll get the annual financial statements in due course. We review financial policies as they come up, and we also review the insurance coverage. So there's a broad set of responsibilities in audit and risk. The detailed budget will be presented by Sean and Judah today. This is a pivotal year for CPATA in that there's a substantial increase in the fees and an expansion of the scope and operations of CPATA, at least its breadth, with some strategic investments, and also building reserves for operations and for specific purposes. So that's an overview of what the committee is doing on your behalf and the material that comes before you. And I'm happy to answer questions before we get into the budget.
Thanks so much, Bob. Oh my gosh, what a tremendous reassurance to the board to have you and your skilled colleagues on the committee. Just huge thanks to you. This is a really big job and an important job, and we're very grateful for your work. Thank you. So questions for Bob or comments? Any? No, I'm not seeing any. Bob, so up to you. Would you like to? I'll leave it to you to hand it over.
I would just say I wanted to personally thank Idis and Jeff and Maureen for their work, and I think Sean and Judah do most of the heavy lifting, and we're just there with another set of fresh eyes, independent eyes, and ask lots of questions is what we do. So that's fine for me. I think for our section related to the budget, it will go over to Sean and Judah.
Thanks a million, Bob. And Sean, Judah, thank you to you for all this hard work. Over to you, Sean.
Okay, thanks, Bob. That was a fantastic introduction. I must say it's not very often that I sit on a finance or an audit and risk committee, and I'm the junior accountant in the room. This is so Jeff and I are in really good hands there. Excellent.
So the thinking here was that Sean could present the rest of the sort of committee report if there were any questions about the 4 information matters. And if there weren't any, then I could take us through what we've done this year with this budget, what we have as the activity, and then get into the budget that is intended to support all of that work. Sean, did you want to just give a high level on the other areas of the report that weren't necessarily budget related?
Sure. So we have the memo here from the Audit and Risk Committee. Really highlights the last meeting we had at the end of November, which was our second fulsome review of the budget document. So we reviewed that. We reviewed the internal financial statements from the end of October, which are in the package as well. And then we reviewed the legislative compliance memo along, and then did some planning for next year's committee work and looking at a macro agenda and the work plan. So that is where we were at that meeting, and of course, with the focus being on the budget, and then bringing a version here today to the board that we think is supportable and has the background behind it. The financial statements are in the package, in the board package as well from October, and I wasn't going to run through them, but by all means, here for any questions that may pop up on those statements, or even during when we can look at them in conjunction with the budget report as well, or just fine to answer any questions now. Okay. Oh, I see Leonora's got a hand up.
Yeah, Sean, I'm not sure if this is the right time, but I just had a question on the budget forecast, the very last line on page 42. But maybe that's premature. I just didn't really understand what you were saying there, and maybe we'll get to that. But whoever's going to take us through that when we get to it, maybe you could just let us know. I just didn't understand what it meant.
Okay, sure. I'm just trying to find page 42.
Very last.
We'll definitely
last line. Very last
Oh,
line.
okay. Yep. I have it. I have it circled on my copy to make sure that I mention it. Okay.
Great. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
That's great. So questions around the financial statements and legislative compliance memo that were in the package. Anything specific there for Sean? Not seeing anything, Sean. So perhaps as you continue your discussion and you tie everything together with a big bright red Christmas bow, we might have further questions. So go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So Judy, you mentioned talking about the process.
Yeah, so what we were thinking of doing today is just present a little bit of where we come from, where we're planning on going, and then we'll get into the meat of the budget numbers themselves. And so I have a short deck. If you're following on the agenda, you can treat this as though we've wrapped the reports section of the agenda. And we're now moving to items 4 around the highlights activity plan, which will lead back into the budget. And so the purpose of this overview is to share a little bit, to broaden out, to look at where we're at just over 2 years into mandate, get a sense of where we're at, and just road test where we think things have gone well and some areas that we know are needing continued vigilance and potential refinements, with a view to looking back in order to look forward, and also to set the stage for the activities that are coming this year, which give the full story for why the budget is as it's presented. And so what I propose to do is I'm just going to share a short deck that should be coming onto your screens momentarily. And what you have here is the CPATA slides. And what we've decided to do for this year is just share our successes and our current work in progress as against our strategic framework, which is available on our website, right on the left-hand icon. And you can see that it's in 5 pillars: the organizational and regulatory infrastructure, you could call that operations, if you will, professional development and competency, professional regulation, relationships and communications, and governance. So for each of these, we just wanted to highlight a few key pieces of the puzzle that came together this year. The first on infrastructure and organization. Well, first there's the new CEO. And so organizationally, that is a major shift. In a small organization, it comes with significant risk, frankly. Culture matters. Working with a team that is this small, this could have been a significant shift. At the end of the day, I think that the team has gelled really well. I think that we've come together very nicely. The torch was passed very well. As one of our aides in this transition put it, we were able to let one plane land while another took off, and it was a very smooth transition, and I'm extremely grateful to the support of the board and of course to Daryl Pink for making such a welcome environment and sharing his knowledge and expertise with me so that I could hit the ground running early. With that, we were also able to create the first real longer-term strategic framework for CPATA, which is what this document is based on. And at the same time, as we're continuing to build that regulatory infrastructure, we built on our technology backbone. Because we are virtual, we do run virtually, we do not have physical offices, we need to make sure that we have the right technology in place. Mercifully, the improvements we are making are not high cost, but they are adding efficiency gains and security so that we're ready to continue to scale, continue to serve, and to be as nimble and agile a regulator as we can be. The key area for the significant future is going to be on professional development and competency. And I'm thrilled that we have the right people at the right time working with an incredible profession that is dedicated to its success. And so here what we see is through this effort to work with the profession to learn what makes the profession tick, we've been able to work to develop the first ever technical competency profiles for trademark agents and patent agents. This is the necessary foundation for a modern profession. To have that in place, to review it every few years, this is what creates a profession, is to have an agreed upon, defined set of skills, knowledge, judgment, expertise that you can expect from your professional and that you can expect you will acquire to become a competent professional as you enter into our licensing system. With that in place, we've been working on redeveloping the qualifying examinations, as Jen just spoke to moments ago. It's a wonderful process to be able to observe from my vantage point, because we have this incredible input from the profession with all sorts of different people at different stages in their careers and different levels of expertise combining to help us make sure that we're setting a standard that is at entry competency. And we're continuing to calibrate that based on our experiences. What we are seeing, though, is, and what we expect, is that now that we are marrying up the defined competency requirements with what we'll be examining, this will be a straightforward testing environment for those interested in joining the profession. It will be transparent, it will be fair, it will become more attractive over time. We've also enhanced access, and that is our fundamental mandate. And so we've enhanced access through changes to our processes for foreign applicants. The previous system was a fixed rule that was unfair to qualified, competent, foreign-trained applicants. We're seeing changes to legislation, particularly in Ontario recently, that is doing away with Ontario-based work requirements for certain professions. We actually changed this rule from a fixed rule to only require this work placement in Canada in certain circumstances. We do this on an individualized assessment based on wherever we happen to find the foreign trained applicant's experience. Turning to professional regulation, it's been a very busy year, as you all know. The first major change, which was an overwhelming success, was the introduction of mandatory professional liability insurance. Now, here again, we saw a dedicated profession that had done a lot to introduce the idea of professional liability insurance. And IPIC had created a program for its own members. And so some of them were already insured. Some others might have been insured through the firms in which they were practicing. But now we've managed to up the game to protect the public and, frankly, the licensees themselves by making professional liability insurance mandatory. This has gone extremely well. We have seen everyone now up to standard. The public is protected. We know that there are going to be issues given the small number of professionals in this area relative to larger regulated professions such as nurses or doctors or lawyers. We know that there will be a question about maintaining the viability of the insurance offerings, and we'll need to balance that against accessibility and cost. We continue to explore, learn, engage with insurers to learn about the experiences they're seeing. But for year one, this was an overwhelming success. We've also introduced new bylaws, which went through the Gazette process this year, and I give much credit to Jen and my predecessor, Daryl, and our team for making that a reality. We have new categories of license now that better reflect the desire of those who are practicing right now, but who may not be doing each and every prosecution, each and every detailed level piece before CPO. We have given an opportunity for them to stay in the profession through a new category that is reflective of their continued offering of patent or trademark agent service delivery. We also continue to be proactive. Victoria and others have been responding to ethics inquiries, proactively taking questions on a range of issues around ownership, around issues on transferring files, around confidentiality, around insurance and how to protect themselves proactively, around all sorts of questions that come up in real time in people's practices. We encourage licensees to write to us if they ever have questions about how to practice defensively, how to practice in accordance with our rules of conduct. We've also received conduct inquiries and complaints, and Victoria has spoken to that process, and we're beginning to see those move their way after 2 years to those hearings. And so we're seeing the full life cycle now taking shape. We've also first responded to our first cases of unauthorized practice, and this is a significant new area for CPATA that we really started in earnest this year. This was something that had been raised with CPATA, and it is an area that is part of our mandate. And we decided that we would take a careful, cautious, evidence-based approach to see what the harms are by accepting complaints about unauthorized practice, looking at them on a case-by-case basis, responding based on the risk profile, and taking steps as necessary. And as you heard from Victoria, this has led to some early successes in behavior modification, which is exactly what you would hope from the presence of a regulator. So this is a good news story in terms of how we're moving the yardsticks. And as people come to understand that we exist, hopefully that reduces incidents of unauthorized practice as well. And as mentioned, we've held our first discipline hearing from a regulatory perspective. It was an incredible accomplishment, and I truly believe that we are among the leaders in how we can make hearings accessible, fair, and engaged. In terms of our outreach and engagement, it was a busy year. It was a year where, given the changes to fees, we understandably received a lot of input. We received a lot of direct engagement, both positive and negative, around some of the areas where, as you introduce regulation, not everyone will necessarily be on side, or eventually they came on side after learning about why we are doing things in certain ways. It's very gratifying for me when I did have a couple of experiences where licensees would meet me and chat with me about what's happening and say, I really don't like this. And then a few months later, after they saw a bit more about what we're doing, come back to me and say, I get why this is necessary, actually. And so we are starting to see, as we're finding our level with those who we regulate and those out in the public, that people are coming to understand the why of the regulation. I've had lots of one-on-one licensee engagement. I've had coffees, I've met people at conferences, I've picked up the phone, I've had Teams meetings. It's been wonderful to meet this highly expert, thoughtful profession. I am not a trademark agent or a patent agent, but I have deep respect for the work that is being done and want to support this profession's success to the utmost. And engaging with people in this personal level has just been so rewarding and helpful as we engage on this journey. We've also had many one-to-many engagements through our newsletters, which have an incredible open rate, by the way. We know that people are listening, we know people are reading, and we're greatly appreciative because we know that your time is busy. That's why we have monthlies as opposed to a bombardment of emails from us. We did a webinar earlier in the spring to better explain the bylaw changes, the fee increase changes. It was a well-received webinar in English. It was a well-received webinar in French, and an educational moment for me as well to see the differences in our country linguistically, culturally, around how the services are offered by who, and what are the issues for French licensees versus English licensees that were not always the same, interestingly enough. And of course, those who are interested are here today with us for our webcasts. And so we've had many ways to engage with the public and our licensees. We've also been leading at conferences. We've been attending conferences, but I thought I'd also just highlight the ones where we presented. I was at IPIC, and I was thrilled for the opportunity to speak and honored to be invited, and looking forward to continuing to be able to engage with IPIC at their annual conferences, which are an incredible source of learning and engagement. And of course, Jen was in Vancouver with our regulatory community, learning best practices, but also sharing best practices, as she reported at our last meeting. We're continuing our engagement with both IPIC and with government, and we're also starting to reach out into the IP ecosystem. We most recently attended the IPON Summit that Ruth mentioned at the outset. We are at the Innovation Asset Collective Conference in the spring, and here are 1,000 words. Here are 4,000 words to perhaps let that sink in. We all work from home, but when we get out there, it's really meaningful, really a great opportunity to see how the regulatory work lends itself to the work of intellectual property professionals, the work of Canada's innovation strategy, the work of regulators generally. In terms of governance, of course, that's part of the way that we keep our guardrails and our focus. We now have a full board, and we're grateful to the Government of Canada for filling our board. We also have the new bylaws in place, which, as Bob had mentioned, their fees are changing for next year, and that was enabled through the bylaw amendments. And with those new bylaws, we are able to now create financial sustainability for the longer term for CPATA. And we have set fees in order to build conservatively, to be able to build for the work that needs to be done, and to prepare for those complex matters that can come our way. We have the new strategic framework, and we've also right-touched our governance structure. We've changed our committee framework a little bit. We've narrowed and done away with one committee as we realized, as we professionalized at the staff level, and as we had a full board complement, we didn't necessarily need one more committee adding on, which would potentially slow us down as we continue to sprint. And so we've got a lot, I think, that we can be proud of in a very short period this year. And then if you turn to the board materials, we can see that next year, we are just continuing the rocket ship ride. And as we move from startup, burning lots of fuel, to scale up, we're going to need to be careful and make sure that we're able to get into our regulatory orbit where certain things just become more regular, normalized within the profession, normalized at the staff level. And so I won't spend too long on the activities, but what you'll see is here too, and they're at the board materials at page, sorry, bear with me. They start at page 30 of 42. What we've done is you could slice or dice any which way here. What we've done for ease of reference is we've sorted them by area of the strategic framework again. And so what you can see is that we're going to be continuing to be out there for stakeholder engagement. On professional regulation, we're going to continue to take the complaints in and manage the ones that are already in our system. We're going to continue to take unauthorized practice concerns as they come. We're going to start to build out that code of conduct education that needs to happen to normalize the understanding that within this profession, there's no longer just a voluntary code, as important as it was for those who are adhering to it. There's now a mandatory code of conduct that applies to the entire profession. We're going to be on the professional development and competency side, really focusing on the future pathways into the profession and what those look like. Because right now we have different apprenticeships. We have different ways in. Foreign practitioners may not have any Canadian work experience required. Some here and domestic apprentices require 2 years. And so what we're going to be doing is studying the apprenticeships and studying the pathways to see what are the various options that might be available for this board to consider as a matter of policy that would be potentially appropriate to train the next generation of patent agents and trademark agents. We know from our discussions with law firm and IP boutique firm managing partners that it's hard to hire, that there are all sorts of skills that need to be obtained, that it's a tight market. And so one of the questions is, how do we make the pathways attractive to candidates, continue to make them attractive? And how do we make sure that we're recruiting for the best? Because this is a talent war out there. We're in a knowledge economy, and we're at the top of the knowledge pyramid here for extremely specialized, important protection of Canada's intellectual property and for clients' intangible assets. And so how do we make that pathway known? How do we make it exciting? How do we make sure that people gain their competencies in a way that allows them to enter, having gained what they need to know to enter at that entry level and thrive? And so we're going to be working at that. And part of that also is going to be around exam administration. And so Jen and team are moving the goalposts slightly. They are moving from an exam that was to an exam that is based on the new competency profiles. Again, enhanced transparency, enhanced fairness. Everyone can see what we're going to be examining against, the sorts of areas they're going to need to know to become an agent. So it's not about testing to pass an exam. It's going to be testing to show these are the things that people need in terms of skills and knowledge. You'll see that on the logistics side, in terms of infrastructure, we're going to be making improvements to our application portal. We're going to be creating an application portal. Right now, our applicants have to email documents to us, and we are going to create a more seamless backend, and so they can be uploaded, and we can save time and resources on the back end for processing and make a more streamlined service for those who are seeking to apply into the profession. We're also going to be doing other changes in the year and years to come to make sure that our website truly is a service to the public that offers information about the licensees and make sure that that registry is user-friendly. We're going to be spending some time, as we always have, continuing our journey on EDI, on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and Indigenous reconciliation. We're going to start to put together the strategy a bit more. We've done education to date internally. We've done things like anti-bias training on the front lines around registration, around other areas, but we need a more holistic approach. And I'm going to be leading that for the organization because that really is mission critical and part of our DNA. You'll see also that as we continue to scale up, we need to beef up some of our other, checklist type things that aren't sexy, but you need done. These are the parts of Le Petit Prince where they're, maintaining the baobab tree. This is the emergency response plan. This is the enterprise and regulatory risk management. And we've got Andres and team who are going to be working on those. And so as we continue to work through all of those areas, underneath it all, of course, or over top of it all, perhaps I should say, is governance. And you'll see that there's a lot happening next year for governance as well. We know that there are elections coming for 2 director positions. We know that there may be turnover at the governing in council level. So there will be some changes in the board that will lead to onboarding. We'll have some board evaluation before then to see how we're doing, lessons learned for how we can continuously improve. We're also continuing to develop our governance policies to right-size them and to modernize them and make them as consistent as possible with our new bylaws. And we're continuing to work on the other nuts and bolts around our governance to make sure that we are best in class regulator and able to do the mandate that has been set to us by government. So you can see that there's a lot on the go. And again, this is the part where I should probably remind everyone that we're a small group. One of the things we've done for budget is we've shown how we've used fractional staff to supplement the 6 full-time staff. 5.8 if we're being technical, but 6 full-time staff. We have Sean and Victoria. They are fractional support to us, but we have put the line item on salaries to include those because it's like having part-time employees. We certainly treat them as full members of our team. And so with that sort of background and subject to questions about the activities or what we've accomplished to date, which we should probably pause to do first, we can then get into the budget. Ruth?
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Judah. So let's just open the floor then for questions, comments, thoughts to share with Judah on his great highlights report as we contemplate. So the board, I think sort of to try it, to pull it all together, as Judah had mentioned, we have a strategic plan. So the board has approved a strategic vision for the organization. This set of activities that Judah has outlined for us is how we're going to implement and execute on that strategic vision. And the board's approval of the budget is providing the resources that management needs in order to execute on the strategic vision. So really important that all of us bring our thoughts to bear on this, and happy to open the floor for questions for Judah or thoughts. So I'm not seeing any right now, Judah. I think we've had such fulsome discussion about our strategic vision and where we're going and what it's going to take to get us there. So it sounds like that part is well understood by your board. Oh, Andrew's got a thought there. Andrew, please jump in.
The thought came up a few times. I didn't think of a moment to put it in, so I'm going to put it in now, which is on the whole area of unauthorized practice, or the initial discussion around the preliminary injunctive powers that the investigations committee could have. And it's just interesting to hold up that against what really very limited exclusive rights patent agents, and I haven't followed the trademark agent side, but I think it's quite close, patent agents actually have. So if we get someone who's offside, I guess there's two things at play. One is no more calling yourself a patent agent or trademark agent, but many of the activities that they would have been able to have done anyway, up to signing an office action response, they could still do. So is there a protect the public angle there that we've thought of that CPO can continue just keep on doing it anyway?
So there's always a protect the public angle on any inquiry into unauthorized practice. That's the only reason we're there. It's the only reason we care. And there's certainly work to be done to coordinate, to understand when people who are not and should not be in front of Canadian Intellectual Property Office by their own rules should, if we learn of those sorts of matters, then it is for us to take next steps. So certainly we're continuing to engage with CPO about unauthorized practice to the extent that they observe it. And to the extent that others from the public or others observe it, it filters down through to us. So yes, everyone has a role to play. And interestingly enough, most of the complaints we've received so far have been from members of the profession. And at first, one might be afraid that that is because it's all about a battle for turf. That's a cynical view. Truthfully, what happens is these are the people who are the best suited to see what has happened due to unauthorized practice, or are the second in line to get the file, or who have seen somebody walk out and do something and then come into their office after with mistakes in hand. And so we know that there are different vectors through which these complaints can come. And I can tell you that I will be meeting with CPO in the new year to continue the discussion about their experiences on unauthorized practice to date and how we can work effectively together.
That's great, Judith. Does that answer
sort of supplemental, I guess, part and parcel with that is also getting in touch with USPTO and then notifying them. And then there's also, I'm not even sure how the process with WIPO works, but what I get the sense is I can go online and without much intersection between, or actually, can you tell me, how does WIPO know that the registration number that I'm putting down and the fact that I'm representing myself as being a Canadian agent is actually flows through between WIPO and CPATA?
So we share our licensing data on the daily. Any change happens daily in an information share between us and CPO. And so CPO knows who is within our licensing pool and who is not. That data is what I would expect would be fueling the international filing type of work between the cooperation of the different organizations. I'll ask for more information about how that operates when I meet with CPO in the new year. But there is an extraterritoriality around some of this, and we have to be careful around where our limits may be and where others may have responsibility in terms of the nature of these types of complaints. To date, I'm not aware of any complaints where there's been others outside of our physical boundaries who are purporting to be Canadian agents who are not, or other areas that might touch on unauthorized practice. We can discuss further if members of the board have information around some global trends that they may have observed. But to be sure, this is a complex area where there are all sorts of different ways that people might try to take advantage of the regulatory framework.
Are you good with that, Andrew? Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, it's not, and it's not about me being satisfied, just curious where it's going with it, and that it would seem like that there's, just from doing my day-to-day practice now, there's really 3 touch points that my CPATA registration matters. It's WIPO itself, where I'm actually in a portal that's completely independent from CPO, USPTO, and then CPO, of course. So the tweak in my mind is that if we were ever to invoke this preliminary injunction ability where we're early onto it, but really any point in the discipline process, Does a notice need to go out to all three entities that this is what's happening? And I can completely appreciate that we're so early days that these are things that we're sort of working through.
No, I think these are good points taken, Andrew. I think that there are two different streams here. There's the complaints against licensees, and then there's unauthorized practice. And so let's start with unauthorized practice. There could be somebody purporting to be a Canadian agent out there. There could be all sorts of other ways that this is done, and we'll have to just take those on case-by-case basis. And depending on the nature of the facts, we'll have to decide what, if anything, we're able to do. If it goes, international or global, there may be intricacies there and questions about how far we can really reach. And that's a challenge, and that's always been a challenge for professional services regulators, where people might hold out otherwise. The other area, though, is around potential discipline, or where somebody is under investigation, and at what point, if we've received a complaint, would we share that information with others? And the reality is that our legislation is quite strict on when we would share information with other bodies, and there are only limited circumstances where we might be able to do so. When we have a public hearing, however, information is public record. And so that is one clear area where, when information is public, we're able to share. And depending on the nature of the matter, there may be other times when certain information can be shared. We don't need to go through all of it now, but the point more generally is that there have been matters where, as part of our investigation, we have reached out to others to understand the state of affairs, and we'll have to continue to monitor to see whether there might be cases where the USPTO would be interested in our work, or vice versa. But to date already, we do liaise regularly with the USPTO. So we're aware, for example, of cases that have impacted on Canadian agents, and they would be aware of cases where a USPTO licensed CPATA agent were involved. I see Victoria's got her hand up, so I'll let her finish the thought more eloquently than I have.
No, not at all. I just wanted to pick up on a point that you made at the beginning, Judah, and to make sure it's very clear that our complaints and discipline process only deals with licensees. So that process is not used at all in relation to unauthorized practice matters. As Judah said, there are two streams. So you're never going to see an unauthorized practice matter be the subject of a complaint that goes to the investigations committee and through discipline. That is just for licensees. So the unauthorized practice stream is, we get complaints or concerns, we investigate, we do a risk evaluation, we reach out and try the informal route, which, as I pointed out in my report, worked really well for the US quasi-Canadian patent agent. We can, as Judah said, contact other agencies, like I contacted the Law Society of Alberta and got their help. If, after all these efforts were taken and a letter of warning was sent out, there was a concern that there was risk to the public, then we could use the injunctive relief through the federal court. And that could involve Canadian, North American, European. However, it could get, as Judah said, very complicated and expensive. So again, you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, a public risk analysis. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear that there are two very separate streams.
But I get that, and I think the only thing I want to make sure that is coming across is that on a daily practical basis, I can interface with the CPO website, I can interface with the WIPO website, and I can interface with USPTO one. And if you've got some point where you've taken away an agent's right to practice, it seems to me that there's at least three practical entities that need to be notified. And it's a mystery to me how the WIPO-CPO connection works even. So that was the only one I wanted to make sure is we thought about everybody we need to talk to. And I'm not contacting the Law Society or the other regulators. I'm saying to practically say, you are no longer entitled to be inside this portal, and uploading documents on behalf of clients is the very surgical question I'm trying to ask.
Understood. Thanks, Andrew. I can tell you that for the CPO side, they get our changes of status every day. And so as of the next day after a hearing, if a hearing has suspended someone, for example, CPO will be aware and their system will be updated, and it will impact their processes from my understanding of how they currently operate. We can look into the intersection between how CPO works with WIPO, and I will do that. It is a fair point. We do have more direct current engagement with the USPTO, given the close relationship between Canadian and US patent and trademark work. I'll look further onto the WIPO area. It is an important piece for sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for bringing that up. And Judah, Victoria, thanks for the fulsome discussion on it. That's terrific. So Judah, are you ready now? Should we hand over to Sean to actually take us through the budget to support all of those great activities that you've been talking about? We're
Yes,
good?
thank you.
Okay, perfect. Sean, you're on.
Okay. Probably quick question on logistics for the PowerPoint. Judah or Andres, should I share, or does somebody have it available?
You should be able to share it.
Okay.
Sean.
Okay, that I can do. Just hold on one sec. I'll make it readable. And then it share. Okay, perfect. Okay, you should be able to, hopefully now everybody can see the PowerPoint. Okay, great. Okay, so this is the second presentation of the budget. We looked at it last month at our board meeting. Okay, so just a quick budget update for what's happened since we met last. So since the last meeting, we made some minor edits to the budget. No significant changes were made, just we received some updated contracts and benefits calculations and things that came in later in the year. So those have been updated. The total change was less than $4,000. So it was lots of toing and froing to make it balance. These edits, as Bob talked about earlier, have been reviewed with the Audit and Risk Committee and have been and are included today to be presented for board approval. And Bob, just a quick note, Bob made a really good comment in his presentation earlier about this being a pivotal year, and really we expect 2024 to really set the stage for for the future years to come. It really should give us a sound footing financially so that we can move into multi-year budgeting and multi-year planning. So this is going to be a very important year. Okay. Okay, so on the income side, as we've talked about with the change to the bylaws early in 2023, we do see new fee categories and new fee amounts for 2024. So that includes the new class 2 who are practicing agents but don't present or prosecute items before CPO. And then Jen talked earlier, and Judah followed up on the highlights from 2023, where we talked about redeveloping the qualification exam program with the addition of the new knowledge-based exam in March in the spring, and then that's followed up again by the skills exam in the fall. So this has resulted in increased revenue because we're going to charge for the exams, and also offset because we now have to pay for additional software and licenses for that software, and committee members and support members to help with the program as well. Interest income. So 2023, we started the process of CPATA's first investments. We had a bit of extra cash after after our fees came in the summer, so we were able to purchase a short-term redeemable GIC and we're able to get just under 5% on that. So we're expecting almost $14,000 in interest revenue just over the last few months of 2023, and we've gone conservative with the budget for 2024 and have put in a budget number of about 25,000. But if interest rates stay up, that could be more. And then this year we've introduced an income contingency for potential income shortages. So this could relate to fees or even applications or the exams or things of that nature. So we've previously always had an expense contingency, but this year with a little more unknown, we've thrown $100,000 into the revenue side. And if there's any questions, by all means, just please stop me. Okay. This is I call the Pac-Man or pizza chart, pie graph that shows just how significant the licensee fees are for CPATA's income. You'll see the class 1 makes up 86%, and then we throw in 2, 3, and 4, and we're up around 92, 93%. And then the next big chunk is the exam fees, and then we get into the application and a little bit of interest income. Okay. On the expense side, so Jude actually touched on a lot of these when he was talking about the highlights. So I'll just run through them quickly. So for 2024, we've made a conscious effort to reduce the number of overall board meetings, but make them longer and more impactful. And the intention is to have at least one more in person in 2024. So that's where we're going with those. As you heard from Victoria earlier, the discipline and hearing costs, we're getting into we're getting into more items, more areas and more items that are coming forward, and the complexity is I'd say they're not more complex than we thought, but we're learning how to deal with that and what the resources are that come with that. So we've increased the expenses in those areas as well. Again, registration I mentioned with the exam and the competency program continuing further development. We've added in some additional costs, as I said, to account for those programs. Salaries, benefits, and programs. So there was some market increases for staff. We had a change in benefit providers, and we've been very lean on training and programs for staff over the first 2.5, 3 years. So we've have some investment into our people. Translation, we've seen an increase in the volume across the board with exams, with the discipline program, even with these types of items with the budget presentation. So we're seeing a slight increase in cost, but more increase in volume has resulted in an increase in our translation costs. And as Judah mentioned as well, next year we're going to be working on enhanced outreach and some engagement initiatives with the profession. And we've got some cost earmarked for that to help ensure that we're getting out in front of people. And then again, I mentioned the expense contingencies again this year set at $100,000. Okay. And then this is a pie chart as well that shows the breakdown of the major expense areas. The three biggest areas, of course, are salaries, benefits, and the outsourced support. So that's the team, and then myself and Victoria. It's just under 40%, which is about standard for a regulatory body. They tend to go up or down depending on the number of outsourced support and the professional fees that are taken or used. And then we've got the discipline and hearing area at 14%, and then the registration program at 16%. So if you throw those three areas, you're up to 70% of costs, and then the board is at 7%, and then there's admin and a few other smaller areas that make up the balance. Okay, so this is a summary version of the budget that was in the board package as well. I've kind of collapsed some of the expense areas into programs, whereas the detailed package has a few more line items. So really here it shows that at the end of the year, we're expecting to have a $350,000 contribution to reserves with a net surplus of $50,000. So what that means is that the intention is to have a $350,000 to $400,000 contribution to our financial reserves at the end of the year. Oh, excuse me. So that's made up of, again, I mentioned the licensing fees. You'll see the increase is about 50% over this year. That's due to the increase in rates. Increased exam fees are about 30% up. The additional GIC interest. And then there's a reduction for that contingency income. Excuse me. Okay. Then a few of the bigger areas that have increased, so salaries and outsourced support. We've tagged an additional position and on the staff side to help with some of the regulatory work and the registration. So that is in there as well. Discipline hearing, so that relates to legal fees, costs for hearings, excuse me. So legal fees, hearing costs, meeting costs, things of that nature, and remuneration for those who are part of the process. Registration programs, this relates to the exams and the competency work that we're getting support on and building for the future. So that is ongoing. The board regulatory and committees, we've really fine-tuned that process this year with the number of meetings, the number of committees. So we expect this to be a solid number going forward. And that's so the board meetings, all the different regulatory and governance committees as well. The administration and office, so this includes, excuse me, so includes things as the office costs, the staff training, things of that nature. Insurance is in there as well. And then we're looking at the translation fees, again, as I mentioned, have gone up. So the budget for 2023 was low. The expected costs are much higher than the 65, so that's why it looks like a big jump, but it's in line with what we're seeing for this year. And then credit card and bank charges. This relates directly to the increase in fees. We do have to pay about a 2.5% fee to the credit card companies when our licensees and agents pay online. So that's gone up again in relation to those overall fees. I mentioned the increase in the communication to stakeholder relations. So that's the extra money that's been earmarked for outreach. And then again, we have the $100,000 contingency expense, which when you take revenue or income less the expenses, gets us to this 350 plus 50 is about a $400,000 overall contribution. Excuse me. And then to get to try to answer Leonora's question, and once the presentation's over, I'll jump back over to the board package and show you how it all works out. But what that looks like is, with the forecast at the end of 2023, we expect to have just under $290,000 in reserves. So if we add that 290 or 289 plus this 400 gets us up to an ending reserve of just under 690,000. And I'll show in a minute, but the target is for the professional responsibility and the operating reserve to get up to about 2 million. So our shortage is about 2.1 less the 690 is about 1.5 million. And I'll show you in the graph how that flows. So any questions on the profit loss operation side before we jump down to the balance sheet or the statement of financial position?
And maybe I should just add that, the reserve policies have a little bit of room in there. So it's 2 million with an asterisk, because if you look at budget 24, the operating reserve would increase given that the budget has increased. And so based on the current formula, it's about 2. It could stretch a little bit, but the point more broadly is that we have taken a very conservative approach to the budget to make sure that we can be sustainable, to make sure that we're able to scale as needed under our mandate, and that ultimately, if we are successful in avoiding some of the needs for contingencies, or if our licensing numbers are extremely positive and beyond expectation, then there would be an opportunity to, at this early moment, contribute even further to the reserves, including to operations for some of those bigger initiatives that are going to be necessary to continue to build the competencies and access of the professions.
Let me see, Tom, you have a hand up, have a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I thought crosses my mind, and I was trying to see if I could figure it out from your presentation. But when we're setting fees for licensing, and then we're setting fees for or setting examination fees, do we go through an exercise where we try to match the regulatory cost of doing those two activities to what we're charging the either the licensee or the registrant? Do we like in other words, are we attributing are we could we be criticized, for example, for front end loading the examination, putting an undue regulatory burden on those who are applying for? So just if you could answer that question, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Tom. It's an excellent question. The answer is that and the board in working through some of this earlier in the year looked at the issues around the total costs for the regulation and who bears the burden of it. And the transition point that is difficult for the profession at this time is that historically, many of the elements of exams, just to start there, were either not built because there had not been a modern regulatory approach yet to the exam setting process, which is not a criticism of how things used to be. It wasn't aimed at that level. And CPO was effectively subsidizing some of these activities on exam administration. They were doing some of this work without necessarily charging full rate back to the licensees of the profession in their annual fees. And so when we looked to what the exam cost should be for those coming in, given that our legislative mandate is access, we realized early on that at this stage, it would not be fair to only charge licensee in training, the applicants, the full cost of exam administration. Exam administration, exam setting, typically there are back-end parts to that need to be absorbed by a profession in order to train the next generation. And so when we did look at the different costs, that was very carefully considered. And so for our exams, accessibility is priority number one. That's why our C3 license is extremely affordable. That's why our exams are not costing thousands and thousands of dollars. They are priced in a way to recoup some of, but not all of our costs. As ideally, we will scale. Ideally, the investment of today, the creating of the exam banks, the creating of the continued exam psychometric work, some of the savings over time will lead to decreased costs on exams. And as we hopefully increase the pool of applicants, we may be able to turn that so that the exams run on a break even. But regulatory 101 would be to not turn that area into a profit center. The goal would be to encourage applicants, and then there would be higher fees for when they are at a higher earning potential once they have become licensees. So that's just one area and one example. We could go through all of them, but I think the point more generally is that absolutely the staff and this board did consider in detail the cost of regulation, and in a licensing environment where it's the licensees who bear the cost for the majority of the income line for this regulator, who ultimately ought to be bearing the cost.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the last slide here is on the statement of financial position, or the balance sheet. And the three areas that I really wanted to just highlight here were cash. And you'll see cash is always extremely important, especially where our fee season starts in late February, mid to late February. So it's important that we have enough cash to pay our bills in January and early February that relate to January and the prior year. So that's why we've got, it's important to see this year we're estimated to have 400,000 at the end of the year. And then next year we expect to have about 345, plus we hope to have 510,000 still left in GICs during the year. And then the intention is that probably in either late 2024 or early 2025, the Audit and Risk Committee would revisit the investment policy and start looking at a more robust investment portfolio versus just GICs once we have the reserve set up and the funds available. And then down the bottom, you'll see again, there's the 350 plus the 50,000 that I mentioned on the previous slide, gets us to the $400,000 annual surplus. And then our total net assets or reserve balance will be just under the 690,000 at the end of the year is the projection. And any questions? And I can jump over to the board package real quickly just to show to answer Leonora's question as well. But before I do that, are there any more questions on the budget here? Okay. All right, I'm just going to stop sharing real quick. Go to.
So Sean, are you, while you're looking for whatever it is that you're looking for to answer Leonora's question, Leonora, do you feel you need more information on your question, or do you feel that the discussion so far has satisfied your?
Well, as I understand it, what Sean said was that 1.5 million, that's the very last line on the HH on page 42. That's the shortfall to our to the reserves we feel we need. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. And the intention would be over the next 3-4 years to slowly build the reserve up into that range, up around the 2 million. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Perfect.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that actually satisfies Leonora's question then, Sean. So there's no need to go back into the board package detailed materials. So thank
Excellent.
you.
Excellent.
So awesome presentation, Sean. I'd like to open the floor to questions, comments from the board. Particularly, Jeff, Elise, do you have anything you'd like to share with us around your experience with this whole budget process?
Yes, I just like to say, I reiterate what Bob and Sean have said, and Judah too. You know, we are trying to be very mindful of the costing at all levels. While we want innovation and we want to grow our profession, we are also mindful of the cost to our licensees and those who benefit or participate in our services. The second point is, so we watch it very closely, every line item. The second is the reserves. It's really important for the long-term sustainability to build it, but also to designate resources for specific things, right? So that it's clear to our constituency that it's not reserves just for reserve's sake. And then the last one is our innovation agenda, you know, to be able to support our innovations in the profession. We will be doing a midterm review of this budget because we said it's an année charnière. So it's an important transitional year, and the robustness of the budget and our performance, financial performance, will give much more credibility and interest within our community. So we will do a midterm review to see where we are and if necessary, fine tune further. That's it.
That's perfect. Thank you, Elise. Jeff, anything you'd like to add?
No, I really have nothing more to add. I'll only say that the budget gets a lot of review, and we try to ensure that that the organization is working on things that are important and within its mandate, and that there's really nothing here that's done for fun. It's really a functional budget.
I can't believe you're saying to some accountants in this room that it's not fun, Jeff. Really?
I mean,
totally kidding.
we're not paying for fun. We're just paying to get the job done. So that's what I meant.
I know, I'm teasing you. Okay, any other comments or questions from board members? So just seeing none and seeing no hands raised, just before I put or ask someone to put the motion to approve the budget on the floor, Bob, now that you've heard Sean's presentation to the board, you've reviewed this at no small level of detail, but hearing the discussion at the board now, do you have any other further comments you'd like to share, or just want to give the final word to you, Bob, in honor as our chair of the audit committee?
Well, thank you, Ruth. The only thing I want to highlight is that there is risk in this budget because of the fee increase, which is the reason why we put the contingency on. Usually it's just on expenses. We put it on revenue. And I'm sure that Sean and Judah and the Finance and Risk Committee will be monitoring very closely in real time the revenue as it comes in. And should we see anything that we think needs more careful review by the committee and certainly by the board, we will bring it to your attention at the earliest possibility. So our eyes are all over the actual results next year, and we'll report back to you in due course. So we'll be very active in oversight next year, hopefully with very few and limited variances, but we'll be ready just in case.
Thank you so much, Bob. We take great comfort and reassurance from the work that you do. When a board strikes a committee to do the heavy lifting in certain areas, it's just such a pleasure to have a committee that gives us this level of reassurance. So thank you. Really, really appreciate it. So now I'm going to ask for a board member, please, to move that. Be it resolved, the board approves the 2024 budget as presented. Can I have a board member make that motion? It is. Thank you. And a seconder. Tom, thanks so much. All in favor? Perfect. Any opposed? All right, that motion is carried unanimously. So thank you again, Bob, to you and to your committee, Sean, Judah, excellent work. Thanks so much. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the appointment of the election commissioner. So I'm going to ask for a motion to be put on the table, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And Judah, you can provide us actually, you know what, why don't you provide any color context or anything additional beyond what was provided in the board package? Why don't you provide that now, and then I'll ask for the motion to be put on the table, and we'll have board discussion. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Ruth. This is a motion for the appointment of an election commissioner, which is not something you hear about every day. So let me just give a little bit of the context. CPATA's board has 4 directors who are elected by licensees. And when director elections take place, under our new bylaws, we have someone called the election commissioner who will be appointed by the board at the recommendation of the CEO to address any issues that might arise concerning the election process. So that could be, for example, around eligibility criteria or around voting and whether somebody was voted in or not. It's a procedural safeguard that helps make sure that there is an independent person who can adjudicate this kind of dispute. If you leave it to the board, there is a risk of conflict because ultimately these are the people who those who are being elected are hoping to serve on. If it is left to the CEO, there's a risk of other concerns around conflict, because ultimately that person ends up becoming the CEO's boss or not. And so there are risks in having either CEO or board as the adjudicator of these sorts of disputes. I was very heartened to see this progressive type of infrastructure built into our revised bylaws that makes sure that those areas of risk are mitigated, and where the public can rest assured that we have the proper processes in place in case of any issues that may arise during an election. In an ideal world, one appoints the election commissioner, and then the election commissioner does not take any steps and has no work. But in case we do need an independent adjudicator, we did seek out, and I sought out, because this is an area of the CEO responsibility, I sought people who have experience in professional regulation, in law and administrative law, electoral law, who might be bilingual ideally, because we do work across both official languages, and we could have complaints come in English or French, and who may have experience in adjudication. And so I'm thrilled to report that Mr. Enrico Scicilone has agreed, subject to your approval, to serve as our first ever election commissioner. Enrico is a lawyer. He is a partner at Actus Law in New Brunswick. He attended Osgoode Hall Law School. He has been deeply involved in both professional regulatory issues in his practice. He has also served as a chair of the board governance committee with the National Arts Center Board of Trustees. And so he's really steeped in public sector board governance issues in terms of policy development, bylaws from the ground up. He has worked in professional regulation and deeply understands and appreciates our public interest mandate. He is fluent in English and French, and I believe would be ideally suited to fill the role. And so it is with that I would recommend his appointment for the 2024 CPATA election. And I do have a motion that I can read out into the record if that would help at this time.
That'd be great. Yeah, and then we'll have discussion. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is simply, be it resolved that the board appoints Enrico A. Scicilone as election commissioner effective January 1, 2024 for the 2024 CPATA director election.
So thank you for that. Amber, Brigitte, I don't think we've heard from you in this meeting. So I'm hoping one of you might want to make this motion. Brigitte, I saw you're up. So you are making this motion. That's wonderful. Do we have a seconder? Amber, thank you. That's great. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure that your voice is heard. So thank you. Thank you so much. That motion is now on the table. Any questions, comments, thoughts around this motion, this appointment, this process? Great. So like Judah, I think that the appointment of an independent election commissioner is a really great thing to do. And Amber, I know that you have experience, wider experience on this sort of public interest item. Would you agree that this is a really good thing to do in a regulatory organization?
Absolutely. And I think that layer of transparency is very helpful. So yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I sure do agree. So with that being said, and seeing no comments, questions from the board, may I ask for a vote? All in favor? And any opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you so much. Next section of our agenda is other business. There was no other business provided to me as chair in advance of the meeting, and none brought up at the start of our meeting when we approved the agenda. So I'm assuming at this point there is no other business, but someone jump in if you have anything. No, I think we're good there. I believe that allows us to adjourn this formal and public part of our meeting and move in camera. Andres, does that make sense to you? Are you good with that?
Yes, just a reminder that the in-camera session will be in a separate meeting, so everyone should have received the link for that other meeting.
So Andres, we've had some concerns with the link. I don't know if I've got a link to another meeting, and I'm not sure if anyone else does. So can you please get that out to us right away so we can get into the other meeting?
Yeah. Should
So
have
that
received it just prior to this one, but we will make sure to resend it if that's
please
required.
do. Yeah, it would be great if
Thank
you could resend an email. That would be fantastic. And for board members, let's take a 5-minute bio break and get that email, and then we'll all join each other in another room in camera. The in-camera discussion will be with the CEO and the board. So I would like to thank our guests again, Bob Plamondon, for joining us today, as well as our amazing, amazing staff, executive team. Thank you very much. And to our translators and everyone else who helped us to facilitate this meeting. And to everyone joining us online, thank you for joining us. It's important to us that you are present with us and hear our fulsome debate and deliberation on all of these important matters. I wish the very best to everyone for the upcoming holiday season and just a sparkling festive season to all. So thank you so much. I will officially adjourn the meeting and see you all in camera shortly.